Good morning, everyone. Welcome, everyone, including board members, members of the public, and Department of Justice staff to the Accountability and Civilian Complaints Subcommittee meeting. I'm going to ask the board members to introduce themselves. Before we even get started, first, can all board members turn their cameras on? And everyone else, please turn your cameras off. Now, can board members introduce themselves? Who wants to start?
I could start. Yeah.
DJ Craig.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Oh, good. Good afternoon, everyone. Chavang. I've been a board member since a few years ago, but yeah, I am in Sacramento, and my day job, I'm Deputy Director of AAPI Specific Empowerment Education Fund.
DJ Kreiner, Fresno, California, St. Res Church Pastor, appointed by Rob Bonta.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Chauncey Smith, Associate Director of Reimagine Justice and Safety at Catalyst, California, currently based in Los Angeles, appointed by Attorney General Bonta.
Any more board members?
There are no additional board members present.
Okay, thank you and welcome. Now, next on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes from May the 21st. Can we review those minutes? And after you look at them, if you have any corrections, please let us know.
A motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
I can go ahead
DOJ.
and I'll go ahead and take the roll call vote. Pastor DJ Kreiner.
Yes.
Kreiner votes yes. LaWanda Hawkins.
Yes.
Board member Hawkins votes yes. Chavang.
Yes.
Board member Vang votes yes. And Chauncey Smith.
Yes.
Board member Smith votes yes. The ayes have it.
Thank you. Moving on to the agenda items 4 and 6 will focus on the discussion of drafts of 2 chapters of the 2025 report. First, we will discuss the civilian complaint chapter. Then we will have a break. After the break, we will discuss the draft of the accountability chapter, which focuses on SB 2, the new legislation that allows the post commission to decertify officers for serious misconduct. Agenda item 4. I'm going to turn it over to the DOJ to lead the discussion of the civilian complaint draft.
Great. Thank you so much, Co-Chair Hawkins, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yasmin Manners. I'm an attorney with the DOJ. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what the draft includes. So I can walk you through the draft, and then I'm available to answer any questions during your discussion of this year's draft. So in short, what this draft does is it continues to develop the prior draft of the report, which you all saw in May earlier this year, based on the board's feedback, expert review, and public comment. So the substance of this draft is largely the same, with some changes to phrasing and also some organizational updates. Some major updates to this draft include the following points, which are first, we now have the 2023 civilian complaint data. So a summary of that data is included in this draft. And then moving on to the more narrative sections of the report, the narrative sections also include an update that incorporates data from a 2024 survey of the 15 largest law enforcement agencies in California. Primarily, that survey data was used to explore, it was used in the report to explore how many agencies still have deterrent language in their complaint forms. Next, this updated draft includes a discussion of youth in relation to civilian complaints, given this year's overall report theme focusing on youth. And lastly, the major development in this report compared to the last one is that the root cause analysis section is laid out here and developed for your discussion. So jumping into the specific sections of the civilian complaints draft, the complaint data is laid out as it has been in past reports. So it includes the total number of complaints that law enforcement agencies reported receiving in 2023. And then it breaks down those complaints by numbers. So it identifies how many allegations of racial and identity profiling that law enforcement agencies received in 2023. It identifies how many complaints reached a disposition, meaning how many were resolved or adjudicated in 2023. And it breaks that figure down into the specific dispositions or outcomes reached. So in other words, the data summary explains how many of the complaints that reached a disposition in 2023 were sustained, were not sustained, were exonerated, or were unfounded. And again, that's all based on what was reported by law enforcement agencies. And then there's a cross-year comparison of the number of complaints and the number of profiling allegations that agencies reported receiving in 2023. And that cross-year comparison is broken down as it has been in prior years by waves, which are determined by agency size. So there are waves 1 through 4, and this is the second year where we have all 4 waves reporting their data. And there are 8 agencies in wave 1, 7 agencies in wave 2, 8 agencies in wave 3, and then the smaller agencies, which amount to over 400 agencies, are in wave 4. Turning next to the youth and complaints section, and again, I'm just providing a high-level overview for your reference. The youth and complaints section, in short, notes that RIPA data has shown in the past that youth aged 24 and younger are more vulnerable to uses of force during police interactions. So for example, in 2023, officers reported pointing their firearms at 5,369 youth aged 24 and younger. Officers also reported discharging their firearms during 9 stops involving youth aged 15 to 17, and pointing their firearms at youth aged 12 to 14 in 3 stops in 2023. Moreover, youth that are perceived to have a disability have experienced higher uses of force during stops compared to youth without a perceived disability. And this is information that the RIPA report or the RIPA data has shown this year as well as past years. So given that vulnerability of people aged 24 and younger to police contacts, the report also lays out a summary of academic research discussing the developmental differences between youth and adults in order to identify why the dynamics might be different for people under age 24 compared to adults. Essentially, what the purpose of this section is to suggest why there needs to be increased monitoring or attention to youth encounters with police, and suggest that one way to do this is, or one tool to do this, is through civilian complaint data. So to that end, this draft contains several recommendations, and those recommendations are that the legislature amend the penal code to require law enforcement agencies to report the number of civilian complaints that are reported by youth. And that would include complaints that are filed by a third party on behalf of somebody 24 or younger, and would also require that the complaint data be broken down by youth who are 17 and younger, and then youth who are 18 to 24, given the developmental differences. The draft also suggests that law enforcement agencies and municipalities modify their complaint forms to include a drop-down box to record if the complainant is 17 or younger or 18 to 24 years old. And next, it recommends that Post modifies the complaint form used to file complaints under SB2 in order to allow the complainant to indicate whether the allegation arises from an incident involving youth. So whether it's involving somebody 17 or younger or between the ages of 18 to 24. The report also recommends that the legislature amend the penal code to require consideration of the complainant's age in determining whether the peace officer's conduct rises to the level of serious misconduct that might warrant decertification. And lastly, the report recommends that the Post Commission amend its regulation 1205 to require consideration of the complainant's age in determining if a peace officer's conduct rises to the level of serious misconduct that warrants decertification. So all that to say, this new section of the report addresses differences in youth interactions with police compared to adults, and the reasons for making these recommendations that age be considered in complaint data. Turning now to the other sections of the report which were included in the prior draft, we can start first with a section discussing the need for a uniform definition of civilian complaint. Oh, I'm sorry, I see a question from Chauncey.
Thank you, Yasmin. Just in terms of process, should we like hop in with questions or ideas as you share out, or would you prefer that we wait until the end?
Either way is fine. That would be great. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them.
Okay. One thought that came to mind was I see that there's a focus on officers pointing firearms at youth, and I think that data really sheds light on how problematic things can actually be. But what also comes to mind for me is like other uses of force aside from pointing a firearm, such as using a taser or there's a whole variety of other types of uses of force that could give rise to some form of traumatization with the youth that may not have been accounted for here. So I'm just wondering if there was data on that, and if so, what did it show? What did the data show?
So that's a great question. And I think that's something that we can definitely take a look at. I don't have the data available in front of me right now. But if you give me a moment, I can consult with our team and see if we do have that information readily available. And if not, we can also include it in the next draft. The next draft would be going out to the full board. So we don't have any more subcommittee meetings scheduled for this year, but this subcommittee will still have the opportunity to review any revisions that are made to this draft ahead of the full board meeting, and we have a second full board meeting after that. So there's a couple more opportunities to review and submit feedback to us so we can incorporate that here.
Okay, that sounds great. And what I would offer up is maybe just take a look at, in addition to pointing a firearm pointing a firearm at a youth, what are some of the other types of uses of force that bubbled up to a considerable degree that may be helpful to have a more holistic understanding of those sorts of interactions when force is being used. So it may not be so helpful to have every type of use of force listed out and the numbers for it, but maybe like a top three or like just one or two more examples in addition to the one that's provided.
Sure, we can definitely incorporate that into the next draft.
Thanks.
And then,
Yeah.
of course,
Just a quick.
and member, oh, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick question. I'm assuming since these are stops, this is going to be, these are stops outside of school.
I will need to consult with our team. I'm not the author of this particular section, so I can consult with our team to see what the data is referring to here. I believe this is looking at all stops of youth, so including on and off campus.
Okay. Thank you.
And another question that I have is whether you have any insight on the stop rate for youth, particularly on school campuses. And the reason I ask that is because I've heard from the field that there could be considerable underreporting on those interactions. So I'm wondering what the data currently show, at least at the macro level.
Sure. Jennifer, I see you're hopping in.
Hi, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, everyone. Yes, we do have that data on the stop rate of youth overall. It's going to be in a couple other sections of the draft, the stop data draft and the policy section. And those drafts go through the youth data extensively. And so it'll be in those sections, but we can incorporate some of that data into this draft as well.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer.
Are there any other
Awesome
questions
discussion.
on this? Thank you, Board Member Hopkins. Are there any other questions or comments on this section regarding youth and complaint data before we move on? All right, well, hearing none, and of course, I'm going to pass it back to you all for discussion later, so feel free to come back to that. But just to move on with this overview of the draft sections. So looking at this next section, which discusses the need for a uniform definition of civilian complaint, this is largely the same as it was in the prior draft. There have been some minor edits to phrasing, but the definition proposed by the board is the same that it has been over the years, as well as the summary of the reasoning for that definition. And then next, with this section discussing the need to remove deterrent language from complaint forms, this is also largely similar to the prior draft, but this is where we come across that addition of data from a 2024 survey of the 15 largest law enforcement agencies in California. So what that survey shows is that 4 agencies continue to include deterrent language in their complaint forms. The board previously reviewed complaint forms of these 15 largest law enforcement agencies in California in 2020 and 2021. And looking at their complaint forms again this year, 4 of those agencies continue to include deterrent language. 3 agencies have removed the deterrent language. And interestingly, 1 agency has added deterrent language. So that agency previously did not have deterrent language in the complaint form, and since the board's initial review in 2020 or 2021, they have since added it. What this means in short is that a slight majority of the 15 largest law enforcement agencies in California do have deterrent language in their complaint forms. So this is provided as additional context supporting the board's reasoning for its recommendations to remove deterrent language from complaint forms. This draft also provides a little bit more background on the pending litigation that is potentially going to challenge the constitutionality of Penal Code Section 148.6, which is the basis for a lot of this deterrent language. Past reports have included this background. What we did here was just add it back in so that there's a more comprehensive discussion of the litigation for the reader's understanding. As far as the litigation itself, there are no major updates since the last draft. This case, which is called LA Police Protective League versus the City of Los Angeles, is still currently pending before the California Supreme Court, and they're waiting to schedule oral argument. So if there are somehow updates before the report publishing deadline, we'll go ahead and include those in the draft. But for now, the draft accurately reflects the status of that case. After that, we have a summary of AB 2923, which was the bill that we discussed at the last subcommittee meeting. And that had proposed defining civilian complaint, and it also made some recommendations regarding deterrent language. As was discussed at the last subcommittee meeting, that bill stalled and did not pass. So what the report does now is provide a brief summary. The major changes are just that the summary is reduced to provide a brief understanding of what that bill did, and then acknowledge the legislature for making an effort while also reiterating the board's desire to address these issues. After that, the last major change in this, Cha, I see you have a question.
Yeah, kind of going back to the deterrent language. I know that San Diego Police Department is the one that added back on. Is there a analysis of the impacts that it has on their? Oh, actually, I take that back because their last data is 2023. So I think for moving forward, maybe if we can kind of take a look at what that looks like and the impacts it has on it, adding it back on. Yeah. Sorry.
That's a great suggestion, and we can look at what we can look at through the data. We can take a look at the data to see what that might reveal. We may need to reach out to the agency to obtain some more information about when the change occurred to make that analysis more specific to this change in the complaint form, but we can start working on that on our end. Are there any other comments or questions related to the deterrent language section? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to the root cause analysis section. And what this does is basically build on last year's report. Cha, so you have your hand raised?
One more thing, I think for AB, what is the number? What was it, the Sawyer bill? Is there a goal to kind of acknowledge it in the print and then also acknowledge it from our board to Sawyer around appreciation for the attempts to move it through legislation for us? And I think this is for our board to kind of make a decision, but I just want to kind of put it out there.
Thank you for raising that, Member Vang. And as the report is currently written, it acknowledges the legislature, but we can add in a specific acknowledgement to Member Jones Sawyer as well, if that's what the board would like to do. Great. So moving on to the root cause analysis section, this built on last year's report. And in last year's report, we basically defined what root cause analysis is to provide a general overview for the purpose of encouraging law enforcement agencies to work on incorporating root cause analysis into their complaint procedures. What this year does is look a little bit further at what root cause analysis is, meaning what the principles are, what the process looks like, and how it's practically been applied in complex industries such as aviation, healthcare, and policing. The reason for approaching root cause analysis this way is because there's currently not much guidance on how to apply root cause analysis to complaint data. While a lot of law enforcement agencies do use root cause analysis in certain contexts, it's usually not used for complaints. So this is sort of a novel area for developing recommendations. And by laying out how it's applied in these other industries like aviation and healthcare, where the concept really developed, the hope was to provide some guidance so that the board can develop more specific recommendations to police agencies about how they can use that concept when it comes to complaints. there are a few areas that I wanted to flag for the board's discussion today. And so the first is the need to vote on specific recommendations that you'd like to include in the report. The voting will take place later in this agenda, but after discussion of the accountability draft and after public comment. But now is a good time to discuss what you think the specific recommendations should be in the complaints draft, and whether the recommendations as drafted cover everything that you'd like, or whether you have any proposed edits. And so just to recap where those recommendations are, there are 5 recommendations with respect to youth and complaints on pages 12 to 13 of the draft. There's the recommendation that the legislature define civilian complaint on pages 13 to 14. And then there's a recommendation to address deterrent language on pages 17 to 18 of the draft. And then next I wanted to flag that there's a highlighted area for discussion under the root cause analysis section. And this gets back to what I was saying a moment ago, that given that this is a novel area for recommendations, and that not many agencies are applying root cause analysis to complaints, and there's not a lot of frame of reference that we can pull from, it would be helpful if the board has any suggestions for experts, law enforcement agencies, or other organizations or representatives that you would like to hear from during next year's subcommittee meetings to figure out practically how to develop these recommendations. I think some of the struggle that law enforcement agencies may encounter with the prior report is that there's not a lot of practical guidance on how they can use complaint data within a root cause analysis framework. So if the board has any suggestions for how to develop working guidance, this would be a great area for discussion. And we were thinking maybe next year we can convene a type of roundtable or discussion during the subcommittee meeting. So if you have anybody that you think would be a good fit for that conversation, it would be really helpful to let us know so that we can reach out to them. And then lastly, since this is the last complaint subcommittee meeting of the year, today would be a good time if the board has any areas that you'd like to flag for future exploration in next year's report. This would be a good time to raise those and discuss them so we can begin researching and start next year with a little bit more information for you. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back to the board for discussion of the complaints draft, but I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you. The draft looks magnificent, quite a bit of information. I love the discussion, recommendations that were given from the board members. Do we have any further comments or anything that we would like to see added to the draft, board members? You want to just go through it? I can't hear you, Chauncey, somehow. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. There was a lot of information,
Hello?
especially when you're bringing in these youth.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? All right. Sorry. I tried to use these headphones, but I think they didn't work. So I was just saying thank you. I agree with your comments, your sentiments in regards to the draft of this section of the report. I think it's well written and very thorough. When I'm thinking about the root cause analysis section specifically, one thing that came to mind are the comparables that are being offered up as examples of how a root cause analysis could be helpful within the context of understanding different problems that may arise within the context of law enforcement. So, for example, there's one on pilots and another from the healthcare sector talking about doctors. I think another one to consider that's a little bit more closely, little closer in relationship to the overall scope of this work is traffic safety. So to be specific, like more recently within the field of looking at police interactions with community members, you know, we see that a fair amount of those interactions occur within the context of traffic stops, right? Self-initiated by officers. And then the typical, you know, conclusion of a stop is, you know, warning, or someone gets a ticket, so on and so forth, arrest, so on and so forth. And at the same time, there's a significant public concerns about traffic safety and traffic safety outcomes over time, and the relationship between traffic stops and traffic safety outcomes. And what we've been seeing from experts in the field more recently is a compelling argument that really parallels closely with root cause analysis. So it goes something like this. If you really want to alleviate traffic safety, make traffic safety outcomes better, if you want to make traffic safety outcomes better, right, as opposed to stopping people and giving out tickets, which has been shown to be an ineffective deterrent, what has been shown to be more productive to actually improve traffic safety outcomes is to look at the different variables that give rise to traffic safety risks altogether and try to alleviate those risks in order to produce better traffic safety outcomes. So taking a more preventative approach on the front end of things as opposed to responding to something after it arises. So for example, instead of giving a person a ticket for a broken taillight or some form of administrative issue, there's compelling arguments to look more closely at the things that make traffic unsafe. So the conditions of streets, so road and infrastructure design, right? So perhaps instead of trying to give someone a ticket for speeding, you add more speed bumps, roundabouts, stop signs, so on and so forth to prevent a person from speeding altogether, right? And then the way that folks have got to that sort of policy recommendation is actually looking at the doing a root cause analysis of what gives rise to the unwanted outcomes. So thinking about that example, to me, it makes sense as something to potentially consider as a more closely aligned comparable that may hit home or resonate a little bit better than the examples of root cause analyses from other fields. So essentially looking at traffic safety and then the root causes of unwanted traffic safety outcomes. And then that leads to the field of civil engineering. And there's different research within the field of civil engineering on how to improve urban infrastructure to improve roadway safety that helps produce better outcomes for everybody. So that's one thing to consider as a comparable. So, yeah.
Thank you, board member. Anyone else? I'm gonna have to ring in with the board member. We have to get to the root cause of what's causing this type of behavior. And what can we do to prevent it? Like you said, if it's fixing the roads to the infrastructure to accommodate, to reduce the speed, then let's do that where we can eliminate the tickets. That would help. But we do need to figure out what is causing law enforcement to have so much contact with our youth. And especially when we look at the civilian complaint part of it, what is this? What's causing this? Why are they having so much contact with our youth? And then when we look at the ages of the youth, we know hurt people, and if our youth grow up with this this not trusting law enforcement or having this issue, it creates a problem. So yeah, we do have to get to the root cause, and we have to figure out what is causing this. And also, what about this deterrent language? Some agencies adding it to their reports. That can create a problem. That can intimidate youth and make them feel a little scared to even file a report. based on this deterrent language. I'm a little concerned that it was added. Board members?
I think
Thank you, Luanda. Thank you, Luanda. I appreciate that. And it also makes me think about the last full board meeting we had. I believe it was in June. And we had very compelling stories and testimony about the lived experiences of youth that have been impacted by law enforcement actions, whether it was different types of uses of force or just their mere presence on school campuses, so on and so forth. And I think it could add a lot of value to the report to maybe add some of the stories or quotes that we received in that board meeting, perhaps in call out boxes or anecdotes, to pair with the data and the substantive research to provide more of a full picture of the different types of issues that we're trying to unpack. So the recommendation is perhaps we could add some stories, anecdotes, call out boxes, quotes, one of those forms to the report to pair with the data and the research. I'm not sure if that's something that's been done before, but I've seen it in other reports in different contexts. So
Yes. So how do we feel about the draft?
Um,
And what about the experts that we should be recommending to come in and speak on this type of the root cause analysis? I think we need to bring experts in on this too. To come to speak to us so they can explain, like you said, the youth who've been victimized of this.
perfect timing, board member Emily, about experts in root cause. And so I think I was just gonna say that I think moving forward as the DOJ staff is, as we're getting more data around the deterrent language, if we just continue to monitor how the switch from not having it before to having it now, and having it before to not having, how it actually impacts their complaint numbers moving forward, or if there's any. I don't know if that, I think the struggle is that it's really up to the police department to report. So there's never a true, we don't know if those are true numbers, but I think it's what we have, and we're going to go with that. And preparing for, as we're getting also complaint data, a little after the report, the year after the report is like the year of the report. And so for us to continue to monitor those pieces, given that many parts of the complaint language, the report is not something new. It's actually just re-emphasizing what we have been making recommendations on. I don't have any further comments. I think just some of the pieces around the youth, where if we can get a better understanding of those complaints being both on campus and out in community would be good, just to clarify that it is an overall it's an overall number, or actually this is just from a certain part. It's just complaints in the community and not just not in school, so that it's a clear understanding of where all the complaints are coming from and how young people are getting approached and stopped with from law enforcement. And I don't know if I don't remember seeing in the report, but how these young people are actually making the reports. Is it through directly through the website, or through the department, or through schools? Would be also a really good for us to kind of explore the access points to complaint and making complaints.
Awesome recommendations. Yes. Thank you, board member. And I'm with board member Chop. I would also like to know what areas we're getting this from. what, yeah, like if it's coming from Southern California, North, like where is this? Yeah, because that helps when we're able to, so I would like to see that information if you all don't mind. If we could pinpoint it a little bit more, because then we know who we're dealing with. If this is a trait that we've seen in adults, now they're got the kids, the youth. Um, so if we can pin it, and it will help them, because sometimes people may be doing things and they don't know it can be hurtful to others. Any more comments? Okay, we will discuss and vote on recommendations in the civilian complaints chapter after hearing the public comment. Let me ask DOJ, are we still scheduled to take a full 10-minute break? Hello, DOJ? Are we scheduled for a 10-minute break?
Sorry about that. We're having some technical difficulties on our end, but yes, we're still scheduled for a 10-minute break.
Okay. So should we take it now or should we wait?
We can take it now if the board would like. Jennifer, you can go ahead.
Yeah, if
Okay.
you would like to take the 10-minute break and come back at 1:01, or actually, let's do 1:02.
Okay,
All right, thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. It looks like it's about 1:02. Hi, Lawanda. So board members, as you're coming back in, please come on camera so we can get started with the second half of the presentation and our discussion of SB2. I cannot hear you. Just waiting for a couple more folks to return from break, and we can go ahead and get started. Your mic's working now. I can hear you. All right, I will turn it back over to you, Chair Hawkins.
Thank you and welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Now, from the break, do we still have a quorum?
We do. We have a quorum. We're able to proceed.
Okay, now we're going to look at the accountability chapter. This focuses on this focuses on SB2, which is the legislation that allows Post Commission to decertify police officers for serious misconduct. I don't know, have anyone heard of SB2? Because this is like a big thing this year, SB2. It's people to file, another way to file a complaint. It's like you have two options now, and you can use both of them. For this chapter, we will also have some recommendations that we will discuss and vote on after the public comment period. And now I'm going to turn the discussion of the accountability chapter in SB2 over to the Department of Justice.
Thank you, Co-Chair Hawkins. Good afternoon, everyone. I am going to just provide a brief overview of the accountability section, and then I'll highlight some major updates that were made to this draft from the last draft that was discussed during the last subcommittee meeting. And again, please feel free to jump in if you have any questions or want to make any comments as I'm talking through this section. So first, to provide a brief overview of the draft accountability section, as Co-Chair Hawkins stated, that this section provides an overview of the SB2 decertification process. The SB2 established a statewide system for the suspension or permanent revocation of a peace officer certification due to serious misconduct. This section discusses the key entities that are involved in this SB2 decertification process. It also discusses the statutory grounds for decertification, including under Government Code Section 1029 and also for serious misconduct. And it defines what serious misconduct. I believe there's 9 categories of serious misconduct under the statute currently. And then the draft walks through the actual decertification process from how Post receives reports of serious misconducts, both from law enforcement agencies and the public. And then walks through that process, the hearing process, until Post makes the final decision on whether to revoke an officer's certification. After discussing the SB2 decertification process, there is a section where we provide an overview. The report provides an overview of the current data that Post has of certification actions that Post has taken against peace officers, including any temporary suspensions that Post has issued while they are investigating these serious misconduct allegations. Then the section now also includes some recommendations from the board on how to enhance the SB2 decertification process, and as well as information about how the public can submit complaints to Post regarding serious misconduct by a peace officer. So that's just a brief overview. I'm going to walk through some of the updates from the last draft that we've added to this draft. During the last subcommittee meeting, we received a recommendation from board members about how to tie this section more closely with the purpose of the RIPA board to eliminate racial and identity profile in policing. So we've rewritten the introduction in this section to try to highlight how this is another tool given to help eliminate racial and identity profiling. One of the serious misconduct categories is bias by a peace officer, for which certification can be revoked. So we've rewritten that introduction to try to tie that in. I think there's other places in the draft. Also, we're trying to tie that more closely with the board's purpose. Also, in the sections in the report, we've included in the key entities, we've included some additional discussion. We had already discussed, the Peace Officer Standards Accountability Division within POST, how they conduct investigations, also about the Peace Officer Standards Accountability Board and the hearing process, but we've also added in some additional information about the POST Commission and how the administrative law judges also play a part in this process. Also, I think the other major updates to this draft are in the data section. I believe it's on page 17 of the current draft. We have that section about that lists some of the data, decertification data. We were trying to clarify, there was a number of comments made by board members during the last subcommittee meeting about how to clarify this data a little bit more, make it more readable. We've included some definitions in some of the for what allegations received mean, the basis of this data. So we just tried to clarify some more of that and also make sure this information is accurate as we receive more information. Also, we've added in here to the chart just to make the process more readable. We're considering adding in a flow chart. We've currently added in as a placeholder a flow chart from POST just to make it, we thought that having a visual representation of the whole process would be more readable for the public. One of the biggest changes we've also made to this draft is the section on page 20, which is board's observations on the process. That was in process during the last, we didn't have that written up yet. But for this, we've included 6 recommendations. There's 6 recommendations from the board. This may be an area that the board members will want to discuss today about how we can enhance this certification process, some changes that need to be made, including recommending to the legislature to enact legislation to fund a statewide public awareness campaign to better inform the public about the SB2 process and how they can file civilian complaints directly with POST. Another recommendation is that, as I mentioned briefly, California law identifies 9 categories of serious misconduct that can serve as the basis for POST to suspend or revoke a peace officer certification. But those categories may not encompass all areas of misconduct that officers can engage in that are harmful to the public and should result in a certification, decertification action, such as dereliction of duty. Another possible gap in the process is that when POST issues immediate temporary suspension for an officer while they are conducting a serious misconduct investigation, if that officer is placed in a diversion program, then the criteria that's needed for POST executive director to place that officer into immediate temporary suspension would be removed, so that officer there would be a basis to suspend that officer while the investigation is being conducted into the serious misconduct. A 4th category that is that recommending to the legislature to enact further legislation to require the law enforcement agencies throughout California to modify their disciplinary policies to align more closely with the categories in penal code that describe serious misconduct. Also recommending that POST develop further guidelines to further assist law enforcement agencies to make sure that their procedures they have the proper procedures in place to conduct adequate investigations into complaints of serious misconduct. And finally, the final recommendation is that SB2 does not include any currently including explicit protections, whistleblower protections for law enforcement officers if they observe and need to report serious misconduct by fellow officers. There's no protections for them currently in SB2. So that they may currently fear retaliation, which may prevent them from reporting serious misconduct. So those are some recommendations that are current in the current draft that the board might want to discuss today. Also, as I mentioned, there's now a new section, which is still in process as well, about how to file a complaint with the Post. And there's also a placeholder for a possible section on vision for future reports. There's a national database that under California law that Post is required to report decertification actions to, but it is not a mandatory database that all states need to use. This is particularly important for officers that may leave California and try to seek employment as a peace officer in another state, or officers from other states who have been decertified who try to seek employment in California. I think those are the major updates in the section. Also, I just wanted to point out that there are some sections that we have highlighted. The highlighted sections are placeholders for data. That is data that will be updated for the final draft. We just wanted to make you aware that we have some temporary dates in there and data that that's information that will be updated. Post updates the decertification data pretty frequently. So those numbers will be updated as we receive more information. Yes, Member Smith.
Thank you, Rebecca. What pages are the recommendations you walked us through on?
Yes, sorry about that. Let me find it in the PDF copy you have. It should be on starting on page number 20. It's the subsection E, board observations on the decertification process.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. That's just a brief overview of the section, update on the major updates. So I'm going to turn it back to the board members. If you have any questions or you want comments or want to discuss this section further for any recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Becca. Board members, do you have any suggestions or anything you would like to add to this? Any changes? Because that was a lot of information, especially when it comes to SB2, which is new, and how it's being handled at Post. I see there was like 28,000 reports. I think that's what it said, over 28,000 complaints that were made. But I believe 50% of them were made before January 2023. So what period are we looking at right now in reports? And how far is this up? How far are the reports? Like if you make the report in January, how long does it take a report to be processed? Should we look at a time on these reports? Should we be concerned if somebody made a report in January, will that report be handled this year, next year? When will Post? Should we look at the time length? How long does it take? That's just a suggestion.
Yeah, thank you
Any
for that.
Any other suggestions, things that we think we might want to look at and add? And what about the age under SB2? Do they consider the age of the complaint, the person making the complaint? Like if a minor was making a complaint, do they have to have their adult, their parent with them to make a complaint, or, and how does Post separate the youth from the adults when these complaints, or is it all handled under the same? So should we recommend that we would like to see the data for youth separated? That they consider the age of the person making that complaint? Board members? Do you think we need to add that?
I think that could be helpful, Luanda. Thank you.
Hey y'all, yeah, I had my hand up. I was just waiting in line there. First of all, I agree with everything Member Lawanda was saying. I agree with the age question as well. I think that, since a lot of our data is showing that young people are some of the folks that are kind of most targeted for some more egregious stuff, that we need to make a real clear path for how young people and their families respond to any of this kind of stuff. So I think it may be even worthwhile to like have a subsection in there like specifically for that. If you are a parent, if you are a family member, and you have a child, a nephew, a niece, foster child, whatever, right, who's had any of these experiences with a law enforcement officer, what do you do? How do you protect yourself? How do you protect your family member? And I say that also because, I've worked so much with Silicon Valley Debug, and that's their specialty. And, these families go through a lot. So I think that's worthy of a paragraph, right? Just a small paragraph to just say, this is how folks should do it. I just want to say right off top too, I really appreciate the summary data that's added on page 7. I think is really helpful. I also think the flow chart is super helpful. Any of that like really simple step-by-step stuff that I don't have to be a lawyer or read 20 pages of this stuff to get through, I think is really smart. So I think that was a really good addition. So thank you so much for doing that. And I also had a chance to look through the data as best as I could, and the explanation of the data I was doing a moment ago is reading through all the footnotes on it on page 17 and 18 that you had discussed. And I think this is really important. I think it's good to add. I want to note a couple of things about it though, which I find interesting. So first of all, it's interesting and concerning to me that physical abuse and use of force are still the primary sort of reasons for desert. So this means that this is an issue that's still very much alive and well, as much as everyone has seemingly forgotten about that entire conversation. This is very much still with us. The other thing that I noted in my notes when I was looking through the data earlier is on page 19. If you look at this now, of course, for a chip, we don't know where these stops were. So for those 12, California Highway Patrol scenarios, we don't know where in the state that was. But wow, is so much of this happening in Southern California. Look at those numbers. Almost none of that's from the Bay Area. That is almost entirely SoCal. So something's happening there, right? Like that's a real big flashing light for me, which means either the levels of, because that could be all kinds of things, right? That could be there's actually greater rates of misconduct in LA, which I would buy that for all kinds of reasons, but I also don't buy that for others. Or for whatever reason, our agencies and folks in Southern California are more able to mount these claims. And so they've been more successful at getting SB2 claims through this process, which then leads me to ask, what the hell's going on up here then? How is it that we have so many successful SB2 claims coming from LA, Torrance, Riverside, right? Going down the line. So this is not happening anywhere else in California. So that just to me as an academic looking at the data tells me something's going on there. So I just wanted to share that. I mean, again, like look at San Francisco, 5. All the sweeps they've been doing, 5. Like it's just it doesn't add up for me. So it's just an interesting question for us to ask. I don't know if that means that we talk about any of that in the report. It's just it seems like something we should be talking about as a group, because that's a pretty easily identifiable pattern in the data.
Thank you, Board Member Williams. Would any other board member like to bring in, make a comment, add or change anything on the report?
Thank you for putting the report together. I also agree that the charts and the flow chart about how SB2 works is really useful and helpful for folks to kind of understand the process. I think just one thing, in the recommendation, the first recommendation around the public, statewide public funding for awareness campaign, I don't know if we want to be more of who should be making that, and how that funding is actually should be distributed so that actually reaches the communities that need to be reached, and for the education needed to understand what SB2 what provides, what kind of access and what kind of process SC allows them to have access to, right? And so that could be an area of discussion for us to kind of talk about, like, what additional language we want to put into what that funding looks like and who it goes to.
Thank you, board member. Board member Chauncey? I can't hear you, Chauncey.
Yes.
We can't hear
Yeah,
you.
no, thank you, LaWanda. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
One suggestion is not necessarily substantive, but just in terms of formatting. As I look at the civilian complaints section, the part of that draft the parts of that draft that include the recommendations have headings that really pop to the forefront a little bit more. So on page 12 of the civilian complaints draft, it says policy recommendations in bold. And then on page 13, it goes on in bold heading, all caps, renewed recommendations, so on and so forth. On the accountability piece, the title could be slightly upgraded to make it clear that this is a recommendation, and that, because you do see that's a recommendation when you go into the text below the heading, but the actual heading itself, F, says board observations on decertification process. So when I initially saw that, it wasn't immediately clear to me that what was being offered up was a recommendation, as opposed to when I looked at the other parts of the other drafts, it was clear, like, oh, these are recs that the board is offering up. So that's just more of a formatting or like presentation sort of thing that might be helpful, so that it's clear and it hits home in the way intended. And then also, Dr. Armeline, I agree with you on the comments that you offered up in regards to the rate of SB2 actions bubbling up in different jurisdictions, and that giving rise to questions about what's going on in some jurisdictions versus others. And one thought that immediately came to mind was the problem that was identified in another section of the report, where it talks about how the processes that agencies at the local level use to receive complaints can be very pivotal into determining the way in which complaints actually are captured within the context of the data, right? So there was some language along the lines of a member of the public can go to an agency, voice a complaint, and then there's given like two alternative tracks. One is like it's some form of an informal inquiry that doesn't give rise to the level of a complaint, and then the second path is the more formal process through which it would be accounted for in the data. And when we see these numbers in some agencies that are comparably low, especially for some of the larger jurisdictions like a San Francisco or something like that, it does make me think that problem that we're talking about in this different section of the report could be a reason why the numbers don't rise to the level that really makes sense. So that's just kind of 2 cents to add. And then thinking about that problem, it makes me wonder whether there's, I don't know specifically if there is a way. I haven't thought about it right now, but if there's a way to really make that problem hit home in a more significant way so that it comes to the forefront of readers' attention, right? Because if a fair amount of this report is about complaints and accountability, and the data is just being muddied or like underreported through local processes, I mean, I think that should really be highlighted in a way. And I don't know the best way to do that. Could be done through some form of it could be done through the design of the report. Like it could be like just the actual layout of the report, like whether it's highlighted as a subsection or something, just to make it pop and come to the forefront is something that's really important. Because it's not only just that problem in itself, but there's the ripple effects that Dr. Armelin talked about.
I wonder if it even makes sense to do a little outreach to organizations that are active in filing these. I was just thinking about what Member Chaveng mentioned earlier, which I also thought was a really good, because I had some thoughts about this as well. Like anytime you throw up this funding, it's just all the typical shark circle around that funding. All the vultures come out, none of them do shit. None of them do anything with that money. They pay themselves and they go on to the next one. And we all know, because we all have to deal with these people all the time. So like, I agree with my colleague that there needs to be a great deal of thought into like, don't just put out some rando call for this. You're going to get every vulture on earth telling you they're going to do this. They're not going to do any of it. So what we need to do is actually find organizations that have already been doing this work with families who are impacted in this way. Again, organizations like Silicon Valley Debug. They're going to tend to be organizations that are not playing nice with law enforcement. That is what it is, because they're the only ones doing this. And I think we're going to have to talk to some of them in places outside of Southern California and say, are you guys even doing any of this stuff? Are you trying to file SB2 stuff? Are you unable to? Are you not even filing it? Like, I think there's a number of ways that we could get at this question, like Chauncey said, and I don't know that all of them are available just from our raw data collection. So like one thing you could do, or that one could do, is look at the success rate of the filings, right? So I would, one of the things I would be doing if I were digging into the numbers is I would say, oh, this is really odd. Again, we have a high rate of successful SB2s from Southern California, but we don't really have that from Northern California. So one of the things that I would look at on the raw data is like, well, do we have a bunch more getting denied? Is there a difference in the actual amount of claims going forward? This kind of question. But that's really all you're going to be able to answer from the raw data. I think beyond that, we're going to have to actually like reach out to people and like ask, like, what is your experience with this? Are you finding this useful? Are your complaints being processed and heard? Are they not? But there could be other ways to get at it. I'm just kind of thinking out loud.
Thank you, board member. This is good. Board member Chauncey, this is awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate that concern about the funding for a statewide public awareness campaign. I think in principle, informing the public is a good thing. So we do want the word to get out, but the key is the details. So it would be helpful to add some specificity here to account for what Chaveng and Dr. Armelin mentioned. And then I would also add that thinking about this more, I know there's considerable concerns amongst stakeholders and organizations in the field about any potential additional dollars, public dollars, flowing from the state to law enforcement agencies. And in this instance, because we have it, it's a good starting point. But if we were to leave it if we were to leave it in the simple form, it could be interpreted as dollars for law enforcement for public relations to expand their comms teams. And what we see at the local level is that a significant amount of public dollars at the county and city levels are going towards sheriffs or police departments to build, not for, things that people are significantly concerned about, like, whatever's going on in their community, but actually significant portion of the budget is to hire comms staff to do public relations for the agencies to influence the public discourse and in turn how public policy flows. So just thinking about that issue in relationship to this particular piece, we should add some clarity. So for example, fund state public awareness campaign through community-based organizations or something like that, just to qualify a little bit more and to make sure that the dollars flow in the right direction and aren't inadvertently used in ways that may not be in complete alignment with the direction that the board is looking to go. Yeah. So I'd actually even specify a little bit more. It's to community-based organizations that work on policing and community safety issues or something like that. Could be helpful.
Or they can demonstrate an established network in the community. So
Right.
like they can demonstrate, just like you can demonstrate, like, if you are a YouTuber or something like that, like you could demonstrate, I got millions of followers, fam. Like what I say, this goes out to people I have. In other words, my concerns with this kind of stuff are the same as Chauncey's plus. So I had the exact same concern about, like, law enforcement agencies are going to try and get this money, and they're going to try and use it to manipulate PR. They've been doing it on that same strategy for years now. Chauncey described it really accurately. But then on top of that, I think there's this question of, like, again, all the nonprofit vultures out there who also will call themselves community organizations that are in no way tied to the community and are very good at getting these grants and then sitting on their ass and buying a Tesla. So again, what I'm saying is, like, I don't buy this language anymore. Everyone knows how to use that language now. They've all been to their DEI workshops. They all know what everyone's wanting to hear. So I'd want to see, like, actual evidence. Show me that you as an organization actually have a network of actual human beings in an actual community. If you can do that and you are successful at communicating things to that community, you can get money. If you don't, you can't, you shouldn't. I would also go even further than Chauncey on the previous point and say, I frankly can't think of a single reason why a law enforcement agency should receive a dime to do any of that messaging, or why they would be the proper messenger. Like, that seems like just a manifest conflict of interest. So I would strongly recommend that the money is explicitly not available for law enforcement agencies. Like, you could just say that this is not law enforcement funding, period. And if we give funding to the city, this does not mean the city can just say, oh, we're going to hand this over to our law enforcement agency to do so, because they'll do that too. The city will apply for the money and then they'll just move it over to the cops. So again, like, I think if we're deciding, like, we agree with Chauncey and Chauncey's point, we just need to say it explicitly. This is not law enforcement dollars, period.
Awesome conversation. I think we do all need to look at that. How do we want our dollars spent? Any more comments or anything else that think we should add? We now have public comments. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment, please raise your hand and unmute yourself when I announce your region. Hello, do we want to start off with Northern California? I can't see everyone. Anyone from Central California? Southern California. Hi, I see a
Hello.
tag saying the Jamaican. Would you care to make a comment?
I'd like to make a couple of comments. There's been a lot of discussion about the data. Well, it seems to me that the data that we're looking at, that you're looking at, is presumably good data, but the people who have produced it know that it isn't any good. Now, why would they not have disclosed that? I give you, for example, San Francisco. San Francisco reports that its complaints have gone down by 100% to 0. I have a complaint that I submitted to San Francisco in 2022 and another that I submitted in 2023. The one in 2023 was found as unfounded. So it should count as more than 0. Now, the California Department of Justice knows about that complaint because I have given them a deluge of my complaints about my complaint. So at least it should be 1. Now, my experience is not unique. It cannot be unique. Subsequent to that, by the way, what I do is complain. That's my occupation. And I complain a lot of times about the data that I see, and I disseminate that to as many people as I can, as often as I can. And it is not possible to get a complaint into San Francisco through the SFDTA or the other organization that they have handling those things. What they do is they say you have withdrawn your complaint. That's what they do. So let us deal with that. Back to a question that was asked about why is it that so many young Blacks are having these interactions with the police at this disproportionate share. I'll tell you why it is, because it's been publicized, but in a way that many people have not paid attention to. I didn't pay attention to it. Here is what is going on across the country. Police are using traffic stops as crime deterrents, irrespective of whether the people who are stopped were guilty of some traffic infraction or not. And how you can tell that is the case is if you have a disparity of, say, 3 in the stop disparity for Black people, you will see a no action taken or a no result equal to that number. Now, this is something that I only came across yesterday after the OPD disclosed it. This is something that is supported by the NTSB, meaning the federal government is funding these things that are working to the detriment of Black people, including Black youth. So I have given you information. The complainant is finished. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Any more comments from the public? You just have to unmute yourself because I can't see the hands. Well, we would like to thank the members of the public for your comments. And now we're going to turn to agenda item number 8, voting on the policy recommendations in each chapter and any other actions we would like forward to the board to consider, including the 2025 report at the October full board meeting. We will read and discuss each policy recommendation one by one in the civilian complaint chapter and in the accountability chapter. After we have finished discussing, including possible amendments to the language, I will ask a board member to make a motion to vote on the recommendations and for a second to the motion. We will vote on each recommendation, and DOJ will lead and record the votes on each recommendation. So let's start with the recommendations in the civilian complaint chapter.
Hi, this is Kendall. So what we're going to do is we'll pull up a Word document with all of those recommendations, and we're going to share our screen just so everyone can see those. And if they're workshopping to the language or anything like that, we can do that. So while Yassi's getting the Word document pulled up, Co-Chair Hawkins explained a little bit of the procedure. What we'll do is we'll discuss the complaints recommendations. If there are no amendments, we can vote on them as a slate. But I think walking through each of those is going to be really important. So give us just a moment to get that pulled up, and we'll share our screen and we can go through them one by one.
Yes.
Can you all see the recommendations?
Yes.
All right. Let's go ahead and start with the first recommendation. Are there any comments, amendments, or any board discussion we'd like to have on that particular recommendation?
I think we support that one.
Hearing no comments, do we want to move to item 3, or I apologize, item 2 on the recommendations for complaints?
The drop down box to record. I think we agree to that too.
Number 3, any amendments or further discussion?
I think we agree to that too.
Item 4. Item 5.
Support that too.
Item 6.
Yes, we support that.
Item 7. Any discussion? And then finally, item 8. Hearing no comments or amendments, is there a motion to vote on these recommendations, or a motion to send these recommendations for consideration to the full board?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We'll go to a roll call vote. Pastor Kreiner,
Yes.
Co-Chair Hawkins,
Yes.
Member Vang,
Yes.
Member Armeline,
Yeah.
Member Chauncey Smith.
Yes.
The ayes have it. The participating board members who are present approved these unanimously. We will keep these in the chapter and send them up to the full board for consideration. Moving to the second set of recommendations we're going to look at are associated with the accountability chapter. If you'd like, we can go through these one by one. see if there are any direct amendments to that language we can do. And so item 1, I know there was some board discussion on about funding that public awareness campaign. I invite the board to discuss this any further, including possible amendments that may reflect some of that conversation.
Sorry, Kendall, can you clarify that one more time? The request?
So on item 1, it's just asking if the board has any discussion or possible amendments to this recommendation.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I think it would be helpful for us to briefly recap or talk out where I think we landed. I think one thing that was offered up by Dr. Armelane is just some form of express language saying that funds for the public awareness campaign shall not go to law enforcement agencies. And then
I would say,
go ahead.
just add to that, Chauncey, sorry, just add to that, directly or indirectly.
Yeah.
Because otherwise what they're going to do is the city's going to apply for it and they're just going to give it to their law enforcement.
Mhm.
So it has to be like directly or indirectly, these funds are not for use by law enforcement agencies, period. Like, you understand what I'm saying? They'll just end right around it if we don't say that. So it's that's my suggestion how we could word that. But please go ahead, bro. I don't mean to interrupt you.
Mhm. No, I think that's helpful. And I think another thing that I heard was the use of trusted messengers. So community-based organizations that have a demonstrated, network of, have a demonstrated network of, contacts with community members. I don't know the best way to phrase this piece, but essentially we're trying to get it to, I think it would be helpful to get it to organizations and people in the field that can really help spread the word, that are connected to community members, can help, increase awareness. So something to that effect. It may take some wordsmithing. I don't know how easy that is to capture, but I think that's the other major point.
Thank you.
Is there any language you would recommend adding into here? So, Yasi, thank you for updating this as you're
Yes.
speaking.
Yeah, so something along the lines of, funds should be distributed to community-based organizations that have a demonstrated experience serving as trusted messengers with most impacted communities, or communities most impacted by issues of police misconduct, to something to that effect. Yeah.
Are there any other amendments or thoughts about this particular language on item 1?
I would maybe just,
Gotcha.
sorry, on these funds are not for use by, I would just say these funds will not be made available to law enforcement agencies directly or indirectly.
Is there any other discussion on item 1?
The other is not, I mentioned this is more formatting for the recs. Did you have that captured too, just to make sure that the heading says recommendations in the actual document instead of observations?
Yes, I believe Rebecca made note of that as well. But no need to vote on that to take to the formal board. But thank you for uplifting that again. It's really important and appreciate it. All right, let's move to item 2. Is there any discussion or amendments to this particular language? Moving to item 3. Okay. Item 4. Okay. Item 5. Scrolling down to item 6. Okay. Is there any board discussion on any of these other items, amendments to language, ways we may be able to strengthen it? All right, well, let's go to the formal vote then. Since we did do some significant amendments to item 1, we'll go ahead and start with that. Is there a motion to move item 1 as amended to the full board?
A motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we're going to go through our roll call vote. Pastor Kreiner,
Yes.
Ms. LaWanda Hawkins,
Aye.
Cha Vang,
Yes.
Member Armeline,
Yes.
Member Chauncey Smith.
Yes.
Item 1 passes as amended and unanimously by the present board members. For the remaining recommendations 2 through 6, we can vote as a slate to move those forward. Is there a motion to move items 2 through 6 to consideration for the full board?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Go ahead.
The motion's been seconded. We'll move to a roll call vote. Pastor Kreiner,
Yes.
LaWanda Hawkins,
Yes.
Cha Vang,
Yes.
William Armeline,
Yes.
and Chauncey Smith.
Yes.
The participating board members have voted unanimously to move recommendations 2 through 6 to the full board for consideration. Thank you all so much. And I will turn it back over to the co-chairs to wrap up our meeting.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for attending and for their participation, and remind them that the next full board meeting will be October the 16th from 1 to 5 p.m. Thank you.